Springfield's Talk 1041. Hey, everyone. Good Thursday. We're a day away from kicking the weekend off at Scrambler's Friday Road Show. Doors open at 6 a.m. We will, as every Friday, be broadcasting 6A to 9A from over there at Scramblers. And it's a great place to hang out, get some breakfast, listen to the show if you want to, and maybe just meet some really fantastic people. Couple of, one potential winning announcements yesterday. Again, it's just almost on a daily basis, there is a significant positive development or potentially positive development coming out of this administration. And yesterday, there was an announcement in the Oval Office. President Donald Trump, joined by Apple CEO Tim Cook, announcing that they are going to invest another $100 billion into manufacturing in America. This is in addition to the $500 billion that the company had pledged earlier this year. Cook said in a press release, quote, "Today we're proud to increase our investment across the United States, to $600 billion over 4 years and launch our new American manufacturing program. This includes new and expanded work with 10 companies across America. They produce components that are used in Apple products sold all over the world, and we're grateful to the president for this support. Through the American Manufacturing Program, AMP, Apple will increase its investment in production in the United States," White House official told Daily Caller White House correspondent Reagan Reese. It will also incentivize global companies to produce more critical components in the U.S. According to official, Apple currently supports more than 450,000 jobs in the U.S. with thousands of suppliers and partners across the country. Apple had said back in February again that it would invest at least $500 billion, and this announcement is for an additional $100 billion. These announcements, which have been coming since Trump's first day in office, these massive announcements that will oftentimes come from international companies, company from Japan, company from this country, that country, and the hundreds of billions of dollars they're investing here in the U.S. And these are, again, the sort of announcements that would be almost tent poles of past presidential resumes. But for Trump, it is just it's just another day. The Biden administration had the CHIPS legislation that it would talk about, and it was legislation that was going to use tax dollars in order to try and create artificially some chip manufacturing jobs here in the United States. And that was like the one, what they portrayed as a tent pole, again, if you will, of the Biden administration when it comes to domestic economic policy. That was the one, and they will still, if they find the need to try and defend anything meaningful that the Biden administration did, that's one of the things they'll point to. That's the one thing during his entire administration that they can point to and say, well, look at what this incredible legislation that is going to lead to the expansion of chip manufacturing. And even at that, again, it was artificial. It was using your tax dollars. And that was the only one that they can point to during the Biden administration. Trump, every week, it seems like, has somebody in the White House or at a factory or wherever it is that Trump is making the announcement, and they're there to announce that their private company, their private entity is going to be doing the investing. And it's just the difference between the two is so completely drastic. And even previous administrations, Republican or Democrat, Democrats in particular, any announcements about investments, it was always using your tax dollars. It was oftentimes in the name of green projects, and there would be these massive announcements. The Obama administration was one that really did this quite often, and go to some green, to soon be factory, and how this is going to be the future, and it's going to create all these jobs. Well, it was because they were taking $700 billion from you and me as taxpayers to artificially build it up. It's fake. And of course, so many of those projects, specifically during the Obama years, ended up going belly up. They got the money and then closed up shop. And you and I paid for it. To go from that approach to this approach, in which you have these companies that are saying, no, we're going to do it. And should the left not celebrate this? The left, who believes that these billionaires, these companies run by these billionaires, these massive international corporations, they should do more to give back. And Trump, instead of forcing you as the taxpayer to artificially prop up some of these industries, Trump has, on nearly a weekly basis, again, with that frequency, the companies saying they're going to do it with their money. The left should be all over this. This is what the left claims that, that they want from these massive corporations, aside from just not existing altogether. But if they're going to, they need to give back. They need to pay their fair share. Well, that seems pretty much what all of these corporations are doing, some domestic, some international. So yesterday was, once again, compared to previous administrations, could in and of itself, that one announcement, be seen as a real bright star on a resume of an administration, yet for Donald Trump is just another weekly announcement. The other big potential win is the New York Times reporting, as other outlets are now as well, that Trump is planning on meeting Putin as early as next week, a trilateral meeting that will include Zelensky to follow. The very broad expectations have been laid out and apparently accepted. I suspect it's probably about 50-50 as to whether this will happen or will not happen. I think arguably it could be clear the reason that Putin is willing to at least signal he will sit down with Zelensky and Trump is because of Trump and the deadline, these sanctions, these massive sanctions, and sanctioning countries like India for purchasing their oil and helping fund Russia. See, the brilliance of that is that takes a country like India that's been somewhat allied with Russia to some degree, and hey, you do your thing, we'll continue to buy your oil, and probably has them picking up the phone and saying, hey, listen, maybe you ought to try and work some sort of deal out, because now we're suffering financially because we are purchasing your oil. And we'd like to continue to do that because there's a number of reasons that benefits us, but Trump has arranged it to where it's a little harmful to us now. We'd like to get back to where we can not have sanctions put, or tariffs put in the form of sanctions put upon us, or sanctions in the form of tariffs, I should say. So maybe you ought to, try and work out some sort of deal. And this is true Trump fashion, is to isolate the enemy so that it puts additional pressure on them to come to the table. And I suspect that's a significant part of the reason that Putin has agreed to do this. Again, it could, as always with Putin, fall apart and not eventually happen, but little step forward. One step forward, sometimes two steps back, perhaps. This time will be different. We shall see. We've got weather coming up in a moment. Right now, the latest news update.
And the first alert forecast from Ozarks First meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by St. Clair of the Ozarks Home Improvements. Today we'll see a slight chance for showers in the morning, otherwise mostly sunny and hot with a high near 95. Tonight mostly clear with a low around 73. For your Friday, sunny and hot with a high near 99. And taking a look at Saturday, sunny and hot with a high near 98.
On the Pyramid Roofing Company talk and text line, CHIPS Act was so loaded with DEI requirements, few companies had taken advantage of it. Last info I had seen, and this is something that has vexed a number of efforts, particularly the Biden administration. It's why none of the broadband stuff ever came to be, and it was these DEI requirements that were put into place, and that's another reason why the Trump approach is just a lot better. You get other companies with their own money that say, we're just going to invest in the United States because we see that as beneficial, versus the Biden way and the Democrat way, and that is, oh, we're going to give taxpayer dollars to you, but also we're going to tell you how it is that you're going to run your business. And that often, of course, as it's been pointed out, and this text is noting here, leads to virtue signaling through legislation. Look at this legislation we passed, but nothing meaningful actually happens with it anyhow. There are so many revelations that have come out of the declassifications of information from a number of these different investigations, or a start of investigations, the cover-up of investigations. And part of me wonders if, because you think, why would they even leave some of this information available? Now, we know, based off of what Kash Patel has said, and Tulsi Gabbard, and some, I think Congresswoman Luna had verified this, that a lot of the information that's being revealed were in these burn bags, sort of hidden away in the FBI, that were supposed to be destroyed. They weren't. Now, I find that to be a mystery. Why were they not? Was somebody given that job, but they thought, you know what, I'm just going to, somebody that wasn't real comfortable with all the corruption that was going on. They weren't quite bold enough to blow the whistle because they had witnessed how other whistleblowers had been treated by the different agencies and did not want to put their livelihoods at risk. And so instead, they just didn't actually destroy the evidence and left it there to be found. Was there a sense that because Trump wasn't able to get the people in place during the first administration to find all of this, that he would not be able to do it during this administration as well? Maybe it's just arrogance, some of it arrogance and sloppiness. When you are able to carry out certain deeds with such ease over time, you become sloppy. This is oftentimes how criminals who are in the beginning very meticulous and deliberate and take great lengths to not get caught and to cover their tracks, after a while, they get sloppy because they get arrogant. They think we're not going to get caught. It could be something as simple as that. I also think about how much of this, which, by the way, I'm absolutely fine with, how much of this is being revealed out of maybe a little bit of anger, personal vendetta, because Tulsi Gabbard had also been targeted by the deep state herself. I mean, this is an individual who served her country and did so in a military capacity, and then as a member of Congress, and then as a candidate for the presidency as a Democrat, an attempt to serve her country in the capacity of President of the United States, only to find out that that very country that she served, that she had made the willful decision to potentially lose her life by signing up and serving in the military in order to serve, that her own government treated her as if she were the enemy, as if she were a terrorist, trailed her through airports, had her trailed in ways that in our minds we always believed that would only be something that would occur if there was a known terrorist from the Middle East who had snuck into this country and we had information that they were going to meet with a sleeper cell. In our heads, that's what we've always been told that those tools, those assets would be used for. And then, you find out actually it's just used under the previous administration against people who they didn't like. You can't help but think that might have, I don't know, just lit a little extra fire under Tulsi Gabbard when it came to, which is good. And I don't know, perhaps she would, if none of that had ever happened, still operated in the same fashion. But talk about coming back to bite you in the butt. If you could build a time machine, and when the people in the deep state decided we're going to start trailing her, if you had a time machine, you could go back and be like, hey, guess what? She's going to be the director of national intelligence of the Trump administration. So you may not want to do this. They'd think there's no way. She's the Democrat. She was it's just incredible, the twists and turns. It really is the sort of thing that novels are written about, and that movies, intrigue. This is the stuff movies are made of. One of the things that has gotten to some degree overlooked, because there is so much, and there's a piece in the Federalist on this, is about Attorney General Loretta Lynch under the Obama administration and her role in helping cover up the Hillary Clinton email scandal. And we're learning much of this information because of the newly declassified information, one annex from the Clinton administration done by the FBI on her email servers, and then the other, the Durham appendix that also has been released. And so both of those different and separate investigations for separate purposes had gleaned information and communications between the Obama administration and people on the Hillary Clinton campaign. Essentially, what all the information here indicates is that Loretta Lynch's office was giving the Clinton campaign updates on where things are and how it is they're covering for. I'll share just a couple tidbits of that coming up. And, when you see this in context and you remember that secret meeting between Bill Clinton and Loretta Lynch on one of their two airplanes. It was in some random, we forget how that got learned. It was some random airport, and some local reporter just happened to be in the area and saw Clinton, I think, leave his plane and go to the one Loretta Lynch was on, or vice versa. And that's how that got exposed. Otherwise, no one would have known about it. And it was during the investigation. When asked about it, one or both sides claimed that they were just talking about their grandkids. That's all. And, of course, the media expected us to believe all of that. Well, everything that we're learning tells us what common sense individuals know, and that it was a coordination campaign. And a lot of it, by the way, was apparently driven by Obama's ego. It wasn't because of any attempt to preserve Hillary Clinton's campaign necessarily, or just to make sure that the Democrat Party is helped out, but because he didn't want there to be a stain on his legacy. Remember, the investigation was about her during her time as Secretary of State and using that email server. The Pyramid Roofing Company talk and text line 447 KSGF. I'm Nick Reed. You know what I'm going to do today?
What are you going to do?
I am going to have my first experience with Pinnagar Honda maintenance.
Oh, I knew you were going to do that. The girl child car.
I know, the girl child's car. And so the timing of all this is just sort of weird, and I can't believe that I haven't done this before. But her vehicle, just with the timing of when she's had it for a few months now, but it's just getting to the point of needing to have an oil change. And it wasn't purchased there. It's a 2010, but it's a Honda Civic. And so I was like, well, I'm just going to take it over there.
Yeah, sounds like a perfect fit.
But the other thing is, at the same time, since we've really begun working together, I haven't Well, I did need an oil change on my truck, but a friend of ours, he borrowed my truck and he had the oil changed for me. So I just haven't had to do that since then. But with their Pinnaker Advantage, even though I didn't buy it at obviously Pinnaker Honda, but I got it in Republic at that Pinnaker location, and so you still get, if you purchase any vehicle at the other Pinnaker locations, then you still get 10% off of maintenance over there at Pinnaker Honda. And then if you purchase vehicles at Pinnaker Honda, you get 20% off. It's the Pinnaker Advantage. And that's routine maintenance. So anyway, yeah, I'm just kind of excited. Of course, I've been to the location, went to the open house, and they have that really cool new area of which they do the maintenance, and it's sort of all glassed in so you can see everything that's happening, which I kind of think is cool. But Jeff is the one who's going to be taking care of me. He's the tech. As I
Nice.
called and booked yesterday, so I'm very excited
Well,
about this.
I think that
thing.
you kind of missed an opportunity, though, because
Yeah.
you scheduled it on Thursday.
Oh, that's
and you should have done it tomorrow
well,
for Food Truck Friday.
Yes, that is right. They will
Missed
have their food truck.
opportunity.
Well, I've got to tomorrow leave town for a bit, and so I just needed to get it done, and so the timing. But in the future, that's an excellent point. I am going to make a point to do it on.
There you go.
And then just go out, sit, and have some fantastic lunch there while I have that routine maintenance done. And of course, tomorrow, great time to stop by. It's Pinnaker Honda, south of Walnut Lawn and South Campbell, and check out all their incredible deals, including incredibly low interest rates for pre-owned or new vehicles. Lots of incentives they have at Pinnaker Honda. Traffic update. I'm Nick Reed.
Springfield's Talk 104.1, the first alert forecast from Ozarks First meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by J&S Automotive. Today we'll see a slight chance for showers in the morning, otherwise mostly sunny and hot with a high near 95. Tonight mostly clear with a low around 73. For your Friday, sunny and hot with a high near 99. And taking a look at Saturday, sunny and hot with a high near 98.
A number of you just in the last, few minutes texted the Pyramid Roofing Company talk and text line asking if my neighbor is okay. Was this around the time I talked about it yesterday? I wonder why I got a couple of text messages just coming in.
I can't remember you talked about it.
I don't know. Yes, she's
okay,
perfectly
good.
fine.
Good.
And I told her yesterday that I had this conversation on air. So Shirley, who I don't know why I always feel compelled to mention she's like 90, 91 years old. I don't know why. I guess it helps paint a picture. She's very active. I mean, and she's kicking. And she's very social. And so every day she comes over and talks with the crew from Hunter Hardscapes and Outdoor that is doing my patio, which is supposed to be completed tomorrow, maybe even almost completed today, but they're going to have to seed and everything where the grass area that's going to with the machinery and everything, so the grass gets torn up, and so of course they take care of all that. So I mentioned yesterday that one of the guys, the crew, the day before had mentioned to me that he hadn't seen her, and I thought he was kind of joking because she would always come over and chat with them. And then I could tell he actually was a little concerned about her because she would come over every day and talk with them, for like 5 minutes or so. And they just really liked her. They're like, we really like her. And so yesterday, in fact, Daniel, I was in the house. I got a text from Daniel and he said, "Are you home?" I said, "Yeah." And he's like, "Well, I should come out here because deciding where the fire pit is going to go inside the patio." And I saw Shirley was in the other neighbor's driveway. They kind of go back and forth, the two gals, and they'll sit in Shirley's driveway sometimes, and then they'll sit across the street in the other driveway. And I went over and talked to her, and she was perfectly fine. And she was busy or something, but I told her, I said, I thought maybe you got locked in that shed again. And so, yes, she's perfectly fine, and I'm sure she will be over there again today. In fact, I told Daniel this story yesterday. He goes, "Oh, she already talked to me today." He said, "So she's fine." I know she's fine, but she's great, and that much closer to the patio. Very excited about it. I'm telling you, Hunter Hardscapes and Outdoor. You can visit their site, see some before and after pictures. Hopefully, I don't know if they'll utilize the project they did for me for before and after. I know Daniel. I've been taking video and pictures, but I'll have them up on my Facebook page at some point once it's all finished as well. And you can do a cost estimate thing on their website, which is nice. Give you a ballpark idea of what it may cost to do whatever it is you're looking to do, whether it's just a patio or something larger. You want to have a big dance floor for 100 people, or maybe you have a venue and you want to have really nice lighting and water features and sound built in and so forth. They can do all that as well. Do incredible work. HunterHardscapesandOutdoor.com. We'll get this piece up in the Federalist, from the Federalist under Nick's must-read headlines at KSGF.com if you're interested in it. But it is talking about the apparent coordination between Obama's Attorney General, Loretta Lynch, and the Hillary Clinton campaign to help cover up any potential illegal activity regarding her use of a server and then the destruction of evidence that was subpoenaed when she had it wiped. And this is one of the so many scandals that it's not getting as noticed. But some of this is from the piece. I'm not going to read through all of it, but they note that the intelligence that has been declassified, detailed in both the Clinton Annex and the Durham Appendix, originated from Russian sources who had hacked various government and private entities, including the Open Society Foundations, formerly the Soros Foundation. This intelligence was based on intercepted communications among senior Open Society official Leonard Bernardo, fellow foundation figure Jeffrey Goldstein, and then DNC chair Debbie Wasserman Schultz. The intelligence was considered significant enough to be briefed directly to President Obama and credible enough that Comey regarded it as, quote, one brick in the load, leading him to effectively sideline his boss, Attorney General Lynch, and bypass the Justice Department when announcing that no charges would be brought against Clinton. According to one of the newly released memos, in a January 12, 2016 conversation with Goldstein, Wasserman Schultz revealed that the Obama White House was applying pressure on Comey via Lynch to shut down the email investigation because the scandal was damaging the Democrat Party and threatening Obama's legacy. Quote, Obama has no intention to darken the final part of his presidency and legacy by scandals surrounding the main contender from the Democratic Party. To solve the problem, the president puts pressure on FBI Director James Comey through Attorney General Lynch, however, so far without concrete results. Wasserman Schultz also allegedly noted that the FBI lacked strong evidence against Clinton due to the, quote, timely deletion of relevant data from mail servers, which of course became one of the more noteworthy aspects of that entire scandal, in which Hillary Clinton, after it was subpoenaed, had all of that information wiped clean. And when she was asked about it, said, what, with like a cloth? She played the dumb girl role. Now, aside from the political aspect of this, we all know what would happen to a private citizen if there was some sort of investigation going on, and then after evidence was subpoenaed, we destroyed it. We know what would happen. That would be an additional charge. But for Hillary Clinton, well, high-profile Democrat, elite, privileged. It's the March 5th alleged follow-up conversation between Bernardo and Wasserman Schultz that contains the most damning allegations. Quote, the political director of the Hillary Clinton staff, Amanda Rentiera, regularly receives information from Attorney General Loretta Lynch on the plans and intentions of the FBI, which means that while the FBI was actively investigating Clinton, if you want to call it that, the sitting Attorney General was secretly updating Hillary Clinton's campaign. The memo further notes that, quote, Barack Obama sanctioned the use of all administrative levers to remove possibly negative effects from the FBI investigation of cases related to the Clinton Foundation and the email correspondence in the State Department. Durham notes that the FBI considered taking covert steps to determine, among other things, whether Lynch had actually communicated with Renteria. In the end, the Bureau chose not to even investigate. Gee Willikers. That decision is hard to reconcile with what is documented in the FBI's own records. According to Durham, on August 10th, 2016, FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe and Deputy General Counsel Tricia Anderson met with Lynch and showed her portions of the intelligence report. So they went to her and they're like, hey, we've got this intelligence and it's telling us that you are secretly feeding information to the Hillary Clinton campaign about the investigation. So they presented her with that information, and she denied even knowing the Hillary campaign person, but did not, according to the report, address the broader allegations. McCabe later said he expected at least some reaction from Lynch. Quote, like, this is crazy. I never talked to that person. Instead, Lynch was absolutely stone-faced, said nothing about the content of the memos, and gave no indication that she found any of it disturbing or absurd. I don't know how to interpret that, McCabe told the Department of Justice Inspector General. Anderson also found it a, quote, little bit weird that Lynch offered no pushback. She noted that Lynch pronounced Rentier's name in an unusual way and remembered telling McCabe during their walk back to headquarters that the Attorney General's silence was, quote, odd. Not just because she did not disavow the contents, but because she did not even appear offended or upset that her name was linked to the Clinton campaign in such an explosive way. Now, the aspect of this that is also concerning is that knowing all of that, the FBI decided not to do any investigation into what information that they had. And they clearly had concerns and felt that the information was legitimate enough to go to her and confront her with it. And she essentially, I think it was arrogance. I think it was almost the way that they describe it, her way of saying, so what? What are you going to do about it? I'm the Attorney General of the United States. And based off of the FBI's reaction, her arrogance was warranted because they did not even do an investigation. It all stopped right there. And I suspect that it stopped right there because, again, one can, I believe, reasonably infer from the information that's been released that they knew. It was clear to them that there was an illegal coordination going on between the Attorney General's office and the Hillary Clinton campaign, and they didn't want it to be exposed. So they stopped the investigation. It's yet just another... I don't know that there is anyone of significance in the Obama administration that wasn't in some capacity either directing or coordinating with people that were running some sort of corrupt operation. And virtually every single one of these instances was about trying to either overturn or rig an election. You know, the defenders of democracy. Springfield's Talk 1041. I'm Nick Reed. All right, I'm going to just throw at you a couple of other latest revelations or recognitions regarding all of the deep state information that has been revealed by this administration, which truly we can say beyond any question has been by far the single most transparent administration in terms of revealing to the American people things that the government's been doing that has up until now been hidden. Never in our lifetimes have we ever seen anything like it. Now, one can rightfully argue that a large reason for that is because most of it was about trying to destroy Trump, where he was the target of it, all these illegal and anti-American activities and attempts to rig the election, that, it validates him. But aside from motivation, I mean, it's just, there's no one that comes close to us revealing as much information that this government, our government, has been hiding from us as Donald Trump has. There's an interview that is making the rounds online from 2016. And it is in December 16th specifically. It was an interview that Obama did with NPR. And the interview is talking about what was at the time the narrative, the false narrative that the Russians wanted Trump elected, that Trump's campaign was colluding with the Russians, all the things that we now know that were not only not true, but concocted by those folks in the deep state during the Obama administration after Obama directed them to rewrite and redo the intelligence report that said Russia wasn't colluding with the Trump people. And the reason that this is circulating now is because what we know from the declassification by Tulsi Gabbard of all of this information is that Obama knew, he knew, based off of his own intelligence that he had been provided, that there was no coordination that occurred and that the Russians had not attempted to interfere in the election in any meaningful way. And even if they wanted to, they would not be able to. I played a couple weeks to make this point ago, audio of Obama in August of 2016 during a press conference alongside the president of Ireland. And he was asked, because Trump was talking about election interference and so forth, and Obama was saying that that can't happen. Trump needs to stop complaining. Russia cannot interfere in our elections, even if they wanted to. So we know that Obama knew this. And he certainly knew it before this interview he did with NPR. And the NPR interview is making the rounds because he is saying the complete opposite in this interview. Saying that there's, no doubt that one of the questions he was asked, did the Russian hack of the Democratic National Committee and other targets affect the results of the election in your view? And, he rambled on, but his ultimate response was, well, of course it did. He was asked, could you say the election could have turned out differently? And his ultimate, the theme of his answer was, yeah, it could have. And so he was completely lying to the American people and feeding in to this false story that the Trump administration had been compromised and that Trump was some sort of Russian asset, knowing full well that it wasn't true. The Obama administration continues to be painted as some sort of scandal-free administration. And while I've never been a huge fan of Obama and felt that he worked to pit Americans against one another, and, in his own words, saw people who didn't agree with him as individuals that were, quote, bitter clingers, clinging to God and guns and the Bible and so forth. He had a great distaste. I think he's got some racism that runs in him. But he's far worse than I think most Americans, even those that disliked him, imagine that he was. We've learned from these declassified reports and investigations done that he's far, far, far more corrupt and immoral than anyone had ever imagined. A traffic update, I'm Nick Reed. There is a new report, and it's based off a whistleblower from a Central Intelligence Agency analyst who was, they claimed was part of the analysis that Obama ordered to claim Trump coordinated with the Russians and so forth. And this whistleblower saying, I was never part of it, I was cut out of it, and that John Brennan just overrode those of us who said this is the opposite of the truth, and claimed that it was his, in this analyst assessment, that it was John Brennan's pathological need for control that caused the complete and total corruption of the Trump-Russia investigation. And then Robert Mueller, you may recall, the former FBI director and special counsel that left Democrats angry and crestfallen because after the Russian investigation was done, he said, yeah, none of that actually happened. One of the things that was noted during his testimony before Congress is that he seemed oftentimes quite confused, much like Joe Biden. Well, there are reports that he has been for years now living in a memory care facility. We have a fantastic author of the week coming up in the 8 o'clock hour. News in 60 seconds and then more ahead. I'm Nick Reed. I want a great homeloan.com. If you want a great home loan, well, that's the website. It's easy to remember. How convenient is that? Now you can get mediocrity elsewhere, both in customer service and dedication. But one of the things that is a consistent storyline oftentimes with the characters in their team, people coming to them after they've been essentially dropped by their own institution, sometimes because it just becomes too hard. Or we talked, it was either Anthony or Alex, one of the two characters recently out at Scramblers, and they had just within a couple of weeks got it all done, wrapped up, closed, everything taken care of on somebody who had been dropped by the folks that had been working with them for a long period of time. And so I was like, well, why does that happen? And sometimes it's because the financial institution has one person that does the loan stuff, and then they leave, and they don't have anyone else to do it. It's one of the upsides of using the characters in their team. That's all they do. That's what they all do. And so you don't have to worry about the one employee of a financial institution retiring or going elsewhere and then you being left high and dry. They're great folks. They're dedicated, and they can make a lot of things happen that you may not think are possible when it comes to home loans. I want a great homeloan.com because you do. Now, I want to play some audio that I don't want to say it blew my mind, but it sort of kind of did in the context of, oh, man, I guess I just didn't think of that. And the depth to which some of these corrupt individuals in the deep state, like how far back have these people been falsifying information? How far back have these people been faking intelligence reports in order to try and get a particular outcome that they desire? This is Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard appearing on Pod Force One, a podcast with Miranda Devine of the New York Post.
James Clapper was on the team that created, that manufactured intelligence assessment that led to the Iraq war, about the Iraq WMDs. He writes about it in his book, saying that he and his team of intelligence analysts created something that was not there. When you look at his actions then, and you look at his actions in 2016 as Obama's director of national intelligence, you see someone who has no problem whatsoever politicizing and manufacturing and weaponizing intelligence for a political outcome.
Now, how many of us have failed to think back that far? I think most of us, which is pretty remarkable given the fact that a very prevalent narrative during all of that was that was false intelligence, weapons of mass destruction. That was the trigger that justified going into Iraq, was that there were weapons of mass destruction. And while there have always been bits of evidence and intelligence that show, well, some of it got moved out to Syria, and there was, testing done that showed soil samples and so forth, I think most people, in retrospect, recognize that the prevalence of weapons of mass destruction that was presented just wasn't there. Now, I find this to be a fun contradiction for people on the left. How will they reconcile this? Maybe some of you on the left are listening. How do you reconcile this? Because you were all on board with the Bush administration lied that the intelligence report was just a lie. It was crafted in order to justify going into Iraq. Well, one of those individuals, as Tulsi Gabbard noted, was Clapper. He's part of the crew that came up with the Russian collusion hoax stuff that many of you still, despite everything we know, want to believe was legit, or believe that their assessment, while it may have been wrong, they really had the best intentions in mind, and so forth. Okay, so here's the contradiction. The left claims that the people behind the intelligence justifying going into Iraq, claiming that there would be weapons of mass destruction, or that there were weapons of mass destruction there, that those people were dishonest, they were corrupt, they should be brought up on war crimes. I mean, all of these things the left said. Okay, well, some of those are the same people that came up with the Russian collusion hoax. So what do we do with that? How do you reconcile that? Now, this is the difference, I should also note, between people on the left and generally people on the right. I think it's fair to say most conservatives, most Republicans were supportive of going into Iraq. And in fact, when it came to voting for it, every Democrat except, I think, two. You had Russ Feingold, a senator from Wisconsin, voted against it. And I think Dennis Kucinich, the congressman from Ohio, he was another one who voted against it. But other than that, all of the Democrats were on board voting for it, and it was all based off this intelligence that Clapper was part of. But Republicans, for a very long time, even when things started to get a little bit messy, still stood behind the Bush administration and the decision to go in. But as time has gone on, and as we have learned information, and as we learn things like this, conservatives, Republicans are much more likely to say, you know what, yeah, that was wrong. And you know what? Maybe they did fake the intelligence. Let's not forget Donald Trump ran criticizing going into Iraq, saying it was a mistake. And he got the nomination from Republican voters because Republican voters began to learn new information and were more interested in the truth than just subscribing to whatever it is that the Republican establishment party says. And the Republican establishment was very, very, very critical, to put it mildly, of Donald Trump when he claimed that we shouldn't have gone into Iraq and the faulty intelligence and it was a bad decision and he never would have done it. The establishment really was clearly opposed to him in that. But the voters said, you know what, I think that he may be right. Democrat voters don't operate that way. As we learn that the intelligence was faked, do regarding Russian collusion, do Democrats do what Republicans did regarding the Iraq war and go, you know what, as time goes on, we look at it and we learn additional information. I think maybe that it wasn't on the up and up. No, they don't. They just double down. They don't care. Even when some of the people, or one of the top people, Clapper, who is involved in the Russian collusion hoax and involved in telling us that the Hunter Biden laptop was Russian disinformation and all of this, when you look back and you go, you know what, he was also part of the weapons of mass destruction intelligence that you as Democrats claimed was false information. How do you reconcile that? Now, I think they just don't. They just ignore it. because the truth is not relevant to them. And unfortunately, we see that play out, and that's part of the reason so much of this corruption and people like the Brennans and the Clappers and the Comeys feel as if they don't have anything to worry about by creating false intelligence reports, because they believe that people on the left, there are enough of those people that will defend them and believe whatever they say, that they don't have to worry about any significant repercussions. And Democrat politicians like Obama and Hillary Clinton, they believe also that there are enough Democrat voters out there in the population that there will never be enough groundswell amongst the general population to call for them to be held accountable. And they've been right. We'll see if that holds. We've got weather coming up in a moment. Right now, the latest news update.
And the first alert forecast from Ozarks First meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by St. Clair of the Ozarks Home Improvements. Today we'll see a slight chance for showers in the morning, otherwise mostly sunny and hot with a high near 95. Tonight mostly clear with a low around 73. For your Friday, sunny and hot with a high near 99. And taking a look at Saturday, sunny and hot with a high near 98.
Sarah Myers.
Thank you. Foreman Mechanical Heating and Air. It's hot out there, and if your AC is not keeping up, it's a miserable feeling. Whether it's blowing warm air, it's running nonstop, or it's just making weird noises, Foreman Mechanical Heating and Air is the team to call. The great thing about the Foreman team is that they're local, they're honest, they're fast and fair. They'll show up on time, they'll diagnose the problem, and then get your home cool again without trying to try to sell you something that you don't need. From quick repairs to AC tune-ups to full system replacements, Foreman Mechanical Heating and Air, they do it all. We had lunch bunch yesterday, actually, and our winner was telling me, I don't know if you heard this or not, but he was telling me about his experience with Foreman.
Oh, no, I didn't hear that.
Yeah, he said that he hired them because he heard them on the radio, and the team did just a great job out at his home, which is something that you will see time and time again whenever you read the reviews. So if your AC is struggling, reach out to Russell and his team today and schedule that appointment. Now, you can find all of the contact information for Foreman Mechanical Heating and Air under the Sarah's Endorsements tab at ksgf.com.
I was thinking about Russell Foreman at 2 o'clock this morning.
Why?
This is absolute true. I'm not kidding. So I woke up and the air conditioner was running, and I was thinking that there's a lot of dust over the past week around our house because of the work that we're having done with Hunter Hardscapes and Outdoor in the Patio. And, a lot of it's just the machinery, and then there's just so much dirt now where it was grass, and, of course, there's going to be grass planted and everything. And I was thinking about the outdoor unit there and how, you know, the little, not vents, but the little,
Yeah, I know
you
what
know
you're
what I'm
talking about.
talking
Yes.
about? I don't know what the term is for them, but the coils, I guess, or whatever. But they're sort of flimsy, and anyway, they get clogged up, and what a difference that can make in temperature. And a couple of years ago, I had someone out from Foreman Mechanical just to do a checkup on everything, and they clean them off, and I forget the exact details of it, but he was describing to me how much of a difference it can make in the temperature of the air that is being pumped out, based off of whether those are clean or not.
And that's part of their annual preventative
Yeah.
maintenance program. So,
Yeah.
which I should mention more often because they do offer that.
Yeah, and I was really surprised how much of a difference it made. I figured, well, it may make some difference, but I remember the guy telling me at the time, I was like, holy cow, dang, that is a big difference. And so I was thinking, I definitely have to, once the job is wrapped up. And he showed me how to clean them. The thing you have to be careful about is not using high pressure water, because those little coil things, they can bend so easily. They're very fragile. And, to get them back in place if they get bent, it takes a very, very long time. If enough of them get bent, you just have to replace, I think. But so anyway, that's what I was laying in bed thinking about at 2:00 this morning as I heard it running.
Him.
Yeah, I'm toying between calling or just trying to do it myself, but I don't know. And you can buy stuff, they like in a can that's supposed to clean it, and if I remember right, they said it wasn't really necessary if you know what you're doing, but I could be wrong on that. I ain't an expert in that area.
Call him.
Okay, our author of the week that is going to be next hour, and yes, Christy Fulnecki's not here today; she's in court.
Boo.
Yeah. For those of you that don't know, she's an attorney, so she's there in that capacity. She's not on trial for anything.
Thank you for clarifying
Well,
that.
you never know. Some people may not really realize what's going on there. So the author of the week that will be coming up next hour is Margaret Roberts. And she has a new book out, Blowback, The Untold Story of the FBI and the Oklahoma City Bombing. And I'm telling you, so much of this stuff 5-10 years ago, if you were to learn about it, you'd think, well, I can't imagine that actually being true. But now, it's just like people who don't have Trump derangement syndrome and can look at information as it is, information, without the I hate Donald Trump glasses on. I just see so much of this differently now. And the things that I look back on, Oklahoma City bombing, and much of the information she has in her book. And this gal, by the way, she is legit. She's a prize-winning investigative journalist. She was the top editor at National Journal in D.C. and the Congressional Quarterly before she became the news director of America's Most Wanted. And so, she's a completely 100% legit journalist. She's an actual journalist, and she's been following this and investigating this for a very, very, very long time. And if I just, some of this information in the book, and we're not going to be able to cover all of it. You're just going to have to buy the book, but you're going to hear tidbits of information that I think for a lot of us, I'll speak for myself, 10 years ago, I would have thought, well, I mean, she sounds legit, and she is legit, but I don't know. There must be something else going on that just makes it look like the government had some sort of involvement or this or that. But now, I see this stuff completely different. And I've mentioned this before. When Bush was running for president, this is one I'd love for an investigation on this. It's incidental. It did not affect the outcome of the election, though clearly it was an attempt to do so when Bush was running. And there was this report Dan Rather had. Many of you will remember this. And it was a report, scandalous report, that he got special treatment when he was in the reserves because of his daddy. And the proof of that was this letter that Dan Rather for CBS News had obtained. And the letter was from, I forget from whom or to whom, but it essentially was proof that Bush, because of his daddy, had gotten preferential treatment. And to what degree, I forget exactly, but during that was huge scandal, threatening to derail his presidential election. The thing that saved potentially the Bush campaign was the fact that the internet at that time, while not anything like it is today, was in a capacity that allowed people to communicate and to do research if you really knew what you were doing. And there were some people on there that noticed and began talking about it, that of all the weird things in the world, the letter that was typed, it was a typed letter because it was supposed to be back, this was prior to computers and everything being utilized. It was an old-fashioned typewriter. That the font of one of the letters in particular, I think it was just one of the letters, was a font that had not been produced for typewriters until after the letter was said to have been written. And so it was proof that that letter was fake. And when that sort of thing occurs and you look at it now and you think, who was ultimately behind that? Who ultimately would have enough knowledge about Bush's time in the Air Force National Guard and all of the players that they knew that sort of letter was the sort of thing? They had enough background information to know to fake it. They just screwed up because they didn't think about the font thing, and who would? At the time that it was revealed that it was fake, it just sort of was dismissed as, dirty tricks, and this turned out not to be true. And the scandal actually ended up being the fact that Dan Rather went to the news with it. He would end up as the face of CBS, losing his job, as well as I believe his producer would lose her job. And so that became the scandal, as opposed to, and you look at it in retrospect and you see these players that have faked evidence, that these people in the deep state. Well, how much of that was deep state stuff that wanted Al Gore in there instead of Bush? Or I forget if that was when Bush was running for re-election. I don't recall which of the two. And one of the other scandals he faced was the fact that he had gotten pulled over for drunk driving at one point. Well, who dug that up? And it's not like that is necessarily secret information. But again, during that period of time, it wasn't so easy to find stuff on the internet. And knowing what I know now about people like Brennan and Clapper, and that Clapper's hands were all over the weapons of mass destruction information that apparently turned out not to be true. And then he was involved in the Russian collusion hoax stuff. And, how long has this gone on? There are people who legitimate people with a legitimate argument today that say the whole Nixon thing, Watergate, that all was deep state stuff. That was a setup because Nixon was suspicious of the intelligence community, and they didn't like some of the stuff he was going to do. And much like Chuck Schumer warned Donald Trump, you screw with them and they can screw you over, that all of that was about setting up Nixon in order to get him out of office. Can we really say that is not a legitimate perspective given what we've learned today? And by today, I mean in recent history. So anyway, another one that I would love I really genuinely for years have believed that we never knew the truth about. And I'm not saying that I think government necessarily had a hand in it, but TWA Flight 800, it just is inconceivable based off of what we know that was what we were told it was. And many of you may not remember, it was during the Clinton administration, and there was a TWA flight that had, I believe, just taken off, and it was just over the ocean. I don't recall where it took, somewhere on the East Coast, and it blew up, and there were witnesses all along the coast. Again, before the internet, where people could get on social media and say something, and then other people would say it, and so you're like, all right, well, did this person really see this, or they claim it? So these are people who had no connection to each other whatsoever. Witness after witness after witness said they saw a missile or some sort of device flying up from out on the ocean, flying up and hitting the aircraft. You had tremendous number of witnesses, all walks of life, no connection to one another, all with the exact same story, not people that knew each other, coordinated with one another. And ultimately, in the end, they're like, oh, it was just a static electricity spark in the fuel tank. It happens. It had never happened before, but we were told that, oh, yeah. Now, of course, there's a lot of other aspects of it that didn't make sense in terms of what appeared to be cover-up and so forth. But that's one of those, if I had to guess, I would say it was covered up in order to not, I think that would have been after the 93 World Trade Center bombings, if I'm correct. And so there was already concerns about the Clinton administration's handling of terrorism. Maybe it was to cover it up, and so it wasn't another terrorist attack on Clinton's watch. For whatever reasons, I just now, in retrospect, what we know about these people, I think that's another one that we probably weren't sold a straight story on. All right. We've got to take a quick break. We have traffic coming up in a moment as well. I'm Nick Reed. Before the traffic, Pyramid Roofing Company talk and text line. I want to know more about the shootings in Las Vegas at the country music concert. Yeah, that is one that a lot of Americans still to this day say does not add up and make sense. And I'll tell you that during that particular period of time, to me, while there were some things that seemed like a little out of sorts and didn't make sense. Sometimes I think just incompetence of investigators gets confused with some sort of cover-up. I didn't dismiss it as, well, there's no way there wasn't something else going on here. Because a lot of times I look for motive, like, well, what would be the motive of, and so forth. But that being said, again, I don't know that there is any conspiracy theory that might involve our government at this point. A person paying attention can say for sure is ridiculous. And that's where I certainly am.
Springfield's Talk 1041, the first alert forecast from Ozark's first meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by J&S Automotive. Today we'll see a slight chance for showers in the morning, otherwise mostly sunny and hot with a high near 95. Tonight mostly clear with a low around 73. For your Friday, sunny and hot with a high near 99. And taking a look at Saturday, sunny and hot with a high near 98.
Emily Johnson, House Theory Realty. Here is one of your reviews. We contacted Emily about selling our home of 25 years. Emily suggested making some improvements to the house that would increase its value. She was very patient with us throughout the 2 years it took to complete those improvements. We had many questions. She was always quick to respond. We were selling our home in Springfield and buying a home in Texas. The process went smoothly because Emily took care of the details. We highly recommend Emily. She's knowledgeable, personal, and professional. Now, what is, to me, if there's a takeaway, there's a number, but one I'll focus on here with this is noting the improvements she recommended that would increase the value. There are some improvements that you can make to your home that won't increase the value, but may still be necessary because they are just expected. Then there are other things that people, you may think, well, we've got to do this or that because it looks so outdated, that in the market as it stands today, people aren't worried about, you don't need to do that because they probably plan on doing it themselves anyway, no matter what you do. And point being here is that don't make any alterations or changes until you first visit and consult with Emily Johnson if you're planning on putting your house on the market, because she will let you know the things that, yeah, you definitely need. This is just an expected thing versus the things that will actually help you. And some may, you're going to put $10,000 in it, but you're only going to maybe add $2,000 value to your home. She can help you with those calculations. Emily Johnson, House Theory Realty. So while Tulsi Gabbard and Kash Patel and some of the other folks from the Trump administration have been working hardcore at transparency and revealing much of what's been going on. Judicial Watch has, as they always are, been doing their due diligence as well, and newly obtained documents by Judicial Watch from the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI reveal that the Biden administration was warned that Minnesota Governor Tim Walz had concerning ties to communist China, and that China was very, very, very ecstatic at this pick. The 47-page document dump obtained through a March 2025 FOIA lawsuit exposes that federal law enforcement and intelligence agencies had flagged Walz as a major national security concern. And, of course, the fact that those warnings were hidden from the public as he was being handpicked by the Biden-Harris campaign to join the 2024 ticket. According to emails and chat logs from Department of Homeland Security's Nation-State Threat Biweekly Sync Group, federal agents were openly discussing how the Communist Chinese Party had cultivated Walz as a long-term asset and saw his selection as vice president as a major win for Beijing. Now, again, these aren't Trump people. This is during the Biden term that you had revealed through the FOIA request, intelligence agents talking about the fact that Walz was a long-term asset. All this talk about Trump being a Russian asset, Tulsi Gabbard being a Russian asset, which was all made up. Meanwhile, out of all the players on the political stage of the last few years, Tim Walz actually was seen by the Communist Chinese as an asset that they had been grooming, and probably like Swalwell, he wasn't smart enough to realize that he was being used in that capacity. Not exactly the sharpest tool in the shed. Despite the growing alarm from multiple intelligence branches, including the FBI, Homeland Security Investigations, and the Counterintelligence Task Force, top Biden officials appeared more concerned with optics than national security. At least one official hinted at the explosive nature of the finding, writing, quote, "If anyone has interest, I can provide context in a classified setting." Another adding, "This has more of a strategic impact than the general public knows." A participant in the Department of Homeland Security chat warned that their ongoing conversations about Walz and China was FOIA-able, acknowledging the legal vulnerability of their cover-up as the administration continued pushing Walz towards national prominence. So they knew. They had been told that he was a long-term communist Chinese asset, and they didn't care. Now, another potential communist Chinese asset giving Democrats headaches is a Democrat that many were hoping could be the normalization of the Democrat Party. We've talked about there are a number of Democrats that the establishment party had hoped would or will still rise to the top, Slotnick being one of them, because they're less crazy. And they're hoping to sort of rewrite the ship a little bit. And one of those Democrats is Abigail Spanberger, and she is a gubernatorial candidate for Virginia. She's a Democrat. And she's presented as normal. Oh, she's a patriot. She's former CIA, which... You want to talk about such a division in this country between who trusts who, and whenever you talk about somebody from the CIA, an organization that, given what we know today, you have one segment of the population horrified at the notion of somebody from the CIA being elected, but Democrats just love this. They eat it up, embrace it. Well, it turns out that she received two separate $25,000 donation installments in April and May from Pin Ni, a Chinese businessman connected to the Communist Chinese Party, and also president of Wangzhang America, which is an automotive conglomerate, which has, it's connected to the Communist Party. And all of this while at the same time she's promoting electric vehicles that are all part of this conglomerate. And so obviously, most people would see that as at the very least a little inappropriate. But here's another top Democrat taking thousands and thousands of dollars from the Communist Chinese while promoting electric vehicles that have connections to the Communist Chinese, and Democrats are just A-OK with this. Perfectly fine. What they're not okay with, however, and it isn't the fact that she might, like Tim Walz, be a potential Chinese asset or that she's taking tens of thousands of dollars from the Communist Chinese. They're fine with that. But what they're not fine with is her recent waffling on whether or not girls should be forced to use bathrooms with boys. So we'll have a local story out of Virginia on that next. I'm Nick Reed. One of the great Democrat hopefuls is Abigail Spanberger, and she's one that actually a lot of Republicans, I don't want to say they fear her, but they see her as, hey, she's kind of a not crazy one, so she may have appeal towards more independent voters. But there are a couple of different scandals. One, interestingly enough, that Democrats don't seem to care about, and that is the fact that she took, this is just what we know so far, $50,000 from a Chinese businessman who is with the Communist Chinese Party. And, at the same time, she's promoting electric vehicles that are, companies connected to the Communist Chinese Party. And so, it's just another one of these instances in which you have a Democrat that is apparently more interested in representing the Communist Chinese than Americans, or in this case, the people of Virginia, as she runs for governor there. That Democrats don't seem to care about so much. However, they are very, very upset. Many of them are fuming at the fact that she is backing off on her previous stance that girls should be forced to compete against boys and use bathrooms with boys and so forth. And so she's taken past positions on this, but now that she's running for governor, she's taking the new position. And this is a similar position to Pete Buttigieg, and it is clearly this is the new position that Democrats are going to be taking as we get into the midterm and probably the presidential elections. Here's a local story out of Virginia.
I asked Democratic gubernatorial candidate Abigail Spanberger's campaign if she would weigh in on the bathroom locker room issue, and does she support biological males competing in women's sports? They didn't answer those questions, but sent a statement saying that as a mom with 3 kids in Virginia public schools, quote, the safety of Virginia's kids is Abigail's top priority, and she believes that parents have the right to make decisions about what is best for their children, end quote. Since former Representative Spanberger didn't answer our questions about bathroom policy or biological males competing in girls' school sports, we went back to her record. In 2022, when Governor Glenn Youngkin announced his model policy to block student access to locker rooms and bathrooms that don't match their biological sex, Spanberger wrote that mandate, quote, rolls back the rights of kids to be themselves in schools, end quote. In 2023, Spanberger also voted in favor of allowing biological males to compete in women's sports. Nick Minock, 7 News.
Okay, so, I mean, standard stuff. Democrats, knowing that their voter base have, generally or suspecting that, at least when it, and I think they're right, the bulk of Democrat voters don't care. They can do a complete 180 on issues, and they'll just be right there because they're not there for the issues. Most Democrat voters, other than a few like, pro-abortion, but ultimately when it comes down to so much of this stuff, that isn't what it comes down to. It comes down to their belief that they are good and Republicans are evil. And so it's just Team Democrat no matter what. And that is a calculation that Democrats are making. We saw this with Pete Buttigieg a couple of weeks ago, who has always been, all about forcing girls to compete against boys and shower with boys and all this stuff, as did Abigail Spanberger. But now the new position is not taking a position. Well, these are sometimes very complex issues, and this is why local communities, for Buttigieg, it was local communities and local school boards should be making these decisions, not politicians, forgetting the fact that school boards are politicians, they're elected individuals. But that aside, it's the way of not having to take a position. Abigail Spanberger, exact same thing. Oh, well, this is just up to the parents to decide. Well, when it's happening in the schools, actually, it's not. That's part of the problem. That's the problem that so many parents have had all this time. Their kids are being forced to do things that they don't believe in, like share a locker room with boys and compete against them and so forth. The problem that Democrats are going to have, particularly if they're dealing with primaries, is the extreme wing of the party. They are the loudest, they are the most vocal, and they are coming out hopping mad at Abigail Spanberger, going so far as to noting that her most recent response talks about parents having the right to make decisions about best for their children, and that as a mom of 3 kids in Virginia public schools, safety is a top priority. And what the extreme left of the party is attacking her for is talking about safety in the context of transgenders. And they're noting that she wasn't asked about safety. What is she suggesting? That transgenders are dangerous? This is the box that the Democrats have put themselves in. Springfield's Talk 104.1. I'm Nick Reed. Okay. This is some groundbreaking news. BET has announced they're suspending awards show, the like hip hop, Soul Train, whatever awards, and so clearly Donald Trump strikes again. This is what happens when you have a dictator in the White House. You have awards shows specifically for one race of people end up getting canceled. When will it stop?
Way to go, Hitler.
Way to go, Hitler. We've got an awesome Author of the Week sponsored by ABC Books in the upcoming hour. I'm Nick Reed. The Democrat governor of Massachusetts, Maura Healey, held a press conference and warned that because of Texas and their gerrymandering, that it leaves people like her, governors like her, no choice, but they're going to have to do the same thing. So the Republicans in Massachusetts are now going to suffer from gerrymandering in Massachusetts. Now, a third of people in Massachusetts voted for Donald Trump. So arguably, if they haven't gerrymandered, a third of members of Congress should be Republicans, right? Massachusetts has so successfully gerrymandered, there's not a single Republican member of Congress. Not a single one. I think they have 9, is it 7 or 9 members? Every single one, 9 members of Congress, 9 congresspersons, every single one of them is a Democrat. This is how dishonest they are and how reliant they are on an ignorant population and a media that will cover for them. Here, a governor of a state that already has gerrymandered to the point that Republicans have absolutely no representation in Congress, claiming that because Republicans gerrymander, they're just going to have to really fight back and do this. You can't gerrymander anymore. You've maxed it out. Author of the Week, sponsored by ABC Books on North Glenstone. Coming up in moments, first news.
And the first alert forecast from Ozarks First meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by St. Clair of the Ozarks Home Improvements. Today we'll see a slight chance for showers in the morning, otherwise mostly sunny and hot with a high near 95. Tonight mostly clear with a low around 73. For your Friday, sunny and hot with a high near 99. And taking a look at Saturday, sunny and hot with a high near 98.
One, I'm Nick Reed, and it is Thursday, which means it's Author of the Week, sponsored by ABC Books on North Glenstone, and very excited to have Margaret Roberts with us, prize-winning investigative journalist, television producer in D.C. She was top editor at National Journal and Congressional Quarterly before moving into television as news director of America's Most Wanted, and in 2010, she edited the prison memoir Deadly Secrets that was Timothy McVeigh's account of the Oklahoma City bomb plot as told by fellow death row inmate David Hammer, and the Oklahoma City bombing happening April 19th, 1995, something that for a very, very long time you have been covering. And my goodness gracious, I've always had questions that as time have gone on seem to be unanswered, but boy, do you really open up so much more information. Thank you so much for being with us. And I want to start off with 1995. I was a senior in high school, and I was in high school, Carthage, Missouri, and there was a small motel near Kellogg Lake. At one point, they thought John Doe number 2 was there. I remember from the library and the high school watching live on, I think it was CNN, as the bomb squad was opening a car door, sort of trying to do it from a distance and so forth. And it was all about this John Doe number 2 that was being sought out, that witnesses had seen with Timothy McVeigh after the Oklahoma City bombing. And then it just, as best as my memory from so long ago can recall, just sort of went away. And there's so much in this book to talk about. We're going to get to a limited amount of it. But let's start with John Doe number 2. Who was that and what happened with John Doe number 2?
Well, Nick, great to be with you. And that is quite a striking memory of yours, taking us right back to that moment when this story was a huge manhunt story. And actually, I witnessed this along with millions of Americans in horror that day, April 19, 1995, when the federal building in Oklahoma City was just blown up in an instant, creating, a horrific catastrophe. Almost immediately, story turned into the world's biggest manhunt. And of course, having been the news director of America's Most Wanted, I was focused on this from that perspective from the very beginning. John Doe 2 was the never identified accomplice or passenger in the truck who rode next to Timothy McVeigh in the infamous Ryder truck as they delivered and detonated that catastrophic bomb. 24 eyewitnesses on the ground in Oklahoma City, just ordinary people who happened to be there that day, caught glimpses of that Ryder truck with not one man, but 2 in the truck and eventually exiting the truck before the bomb went off, creating one of the great mysteries of American crime. Who was John Doe 2?
And people who remember the Oklahoma City bombing will remember that the internet didn't exist in the way it did today. So, today, if you have mistaken identities or, I think it's just easier to, in this day and age with the information being posted everywhere, you could have people claiming, oh, I saw this, or giving descriptions. But back then, that availability did not exist. So the likelihood of having 24 eyewitnesses all giving this, description and saying, yes, this individual with the sketch that was given was with Timothy McVeigh, I mean, it's just almost impossible, I would say.
Infinitesimal, absolutely.
Now, was there also, because he was said to, if I remember correctly, have rented the truck with Timothy McVeigh, and there was surveillance video that disappeared. Am I correct on that?
Yes, you are. Almost immediately, top journalists began reporting that the FBI had collected videotape showing images of John Doe 2 and Timothy McVeigh. This becomes a thread of my investigation and my book, which is called Blowback, The Untold Story of the FBI and the Oklahoma City Bombing. And of course, the Freedom of Information Act lawsuit for those videotapes that the FBI has never allowed the American public to see becomes a focal point of my investigation and the book. And that landmark lawsuit is still pending today and could one day result in the American public being able to see those images of what actually happened on April 19, 1995.
We are talking with our author of the week, Margaret Roberts, the book Blowback, Untold Story of the FBI and Oklahoma City Bombing. And I'm glad you mentioned it. The stellar host I am jumped right in so quickly, skipped over the important title of the book we're talking with you about. That one of the things that I found about this that I just thought was fascinating and almost inconceivable is all of the different names and people that found themselves caught up in this, one of which is somebody by the name of Kenneth Trentadue. And he apparently could be as much of a victim in all of this as some of those who died on that day back in April 19th of 95. Tell his story, if you would.
You're exactly right. And Kenneth Trenadue's family certainly views him as victim number 169 of the Oklahoma City bombing. And it is an incredible true story. Kenneth Trentadue was a parole violator in California, a prisoner who had served some time in California prison for bank robbery. He was a soldier in the Vietnam War era. Like a lot of soldiers, he came home addicted to heroin, turned to crime. He served his time, and he had a falling out with his parole officer over whether, as a construction worker, he could drink a beer after work. Eventually stopped showing up, and became a parole violator. In June of 1995, setting the stage here, this now was just 2 months after the bombing. At that time when, to go back to your memory of people, all over America were being apprehended and questioned as potential John Doe 2 candidates, Kenneth Trentadue was crossing the Mexican border where he had been visiting his wife's family for the weekend when he was stopped at the border and arrested for that old parole violation. He was kept in California waiting a parole violation hearing for a couple of months, and then, and this is the turn in the mystery that is so incomprehensible, then he was suddenly moved to Oklahoma City from Southern California. And 3 days later, he was found in his suicide-proof cell in solitary confinement, tortured and murdered, and in a horrific scene that the orderly who was tasked with cleaning up the cell afterwards called a bloodbath. However, the prison quickly declared this had been a suicide by hanging in a kind of Jeffrey Epstein-like scenario. That began the Trentadue family's crusade for justice for this murdered prisoner. And it becomes entwined in the John Doe 2 story because Kenneth Trinidad was a dead ringer lookalike for that muscular, tattooed, never identified suspect who rode next to Timothy McVeigh. The story, which I hope your readers will want to dive into in detail, the unraveling of this mystery, is fascinating, and it is triggered. The unraveling is triggered by a message to Kenneth's attorney brother, Jesse Trinidad, from Timothy McVeigh himself on death row in the year 2000, saying that the FBI had murdered Kenneth Trinidad in an interrogation because he resembled a neo-Nazi terror leader by the name of Richard Lee Guthrie, who was an associate of Timothy McVeigh's, and they both resembled so too.
And as people are listening to some of this, and it can sound confusing, and that's why, of course, this, as much or more than some of the other books that we've talked about in the past, recommend people do get in and read it to sort of figure it all out. Do you think, because we listen to you talk, and some of this you look and you think, is this almost Keystone Cop screw up stuff where you got the FBI allegedly killing this individual they thought was John Doe number 2, or they thought it was someone else, it was a mistaken identity situation, or is it something more nefarious? Is it, do you have a sense of the overall, I guess, theme on that?
I do. And to pull a thread here to help people, because it is a complicated story that becomes clear as you follow the mystery. The Oklahoma City bombing wasn't an act of lone wolf terror, as prosecutors told the jury, as the news media told the public, and as history books now tell us today. The Oklahoma City was, very disturbingly, more of a scenario of manufactured terror made in Washington, D.C. by the FBI. Now, there is no intention that building had ever was to blow up. But my investigation, which spans over 20 years and follows this attorney, Jesse Trinidad, through the Freedom of Information Act process, and finally to an FBI whistleblower who comes out of the shadows. This scenario is much more like the Governor Whitmer kidnap plot, where we discover a case full of undercover assets and informants and operatives. And finally, when the whistleblower comes out of the shadows, he reveals that this neo-Nazi terror group, which called itself the Aryan Republican Army, of which this Richard Lee Guthrie was the leader, this group, according to the whistleblower, was created by the FBI as a front group to incite right-wing violence. So that begins to explain what really happened here and why this John Doe 2 mystery man of the bombing, was just essentially disappeared from the case.
Well, people who listen to my show frequently, you mentioning that Gretchen Whitmer case, they know that that's something I've talked about extensively, and about what a clear and obvious setup sort of scenario that was, and sort of the way that you would see reflections of it in January 6th also. So to go back and to hear you reference it in the context of the Oklahoma City bombing, that's really interesting. And I'll also mention, you talk about, you mentioned Kenneth Trenadu and the hanging in the cell while in solitary confinement. And when I first heard his name and learned of that, I thought, well, he was Epstein. But it's my understanding before the term Epstein existed, there was the term Trenadude.
Absolutely. Kenneth Trenadu's murder became a cause célèbre in prisons. And this is every prisoner's worst nightmare, being, having his locked cell invaded in the middle of the night by, a SWAT team and just, being, beaten, brutalized, and killed without recourse. So you're exactly right. This becomes, in prison, getting Trenadude is, the worst thing that could happen to you. And it became the shorthand for what had happened to Kenneth Trenadu.
I've got just one other question. I say that, sometimes I think of another, but then if there are any final thoughts you have as we talk with Margaret Roberts, author of Blowback, The Untold Story of the FBI and the Oklahoma City bombing. I think that, well, in fact, there was a documentary that I came across, I think it was released not too long ago, about the Oklahoma City bombing. I thought, oh, this may be interesting. I'm going to learn some new information here. And really, there wasn't a whole heck of a lot. It was pretty much the standard Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols, a couple of guys that had absolutely no money whatsoever, somehow financed this thing. Nobody knew how or why. And they were responsible for it. Timothy McVeigh clearly had some play in this. Now, not lone wolf, but what about Terry Nichols? Was he involved in any capacity, or is he someone else that got caught up in this, just by happen chance?
That's a great question. I am the only journalist who has ever interviewed Terry Nichols in Supermax prison in Colorado, where he is serving life without the possibility of parole for his role in the bombing. He is a man of many contradictions. Yes, he was involved with Timothy McVeigh in the bomb plot and the preparations for the bomb. I wish I could say that after viewing him, I know what makes Terry Nichols tick. I don't. I can tell your audience that the man I met in Supermax, who was shrunken, fragile physically, appeared to be racked with guilt for more, actions than he has ever admitted to. Just, a tortured soul. But there's no question that he and McVeigh were deeply involved in this crime. What the picture that comes out, however, is that Timothy McVeigh was not the mastermind of the Oklahoma City bombing. It was a much bigger operation.
Well, and then the second question that I predicted I would think of, do you and just all of the information that you have studied and gathered over the decades, if government had not had any involvement whatsoever, any hand in trying to make cases or set up scenarios regarding white supremacist organizations, do you think that the bombing would have occurred?
If they hadn't, that's a great question. I can only tell you that the FBI whistleblower, the undercover operative who comes out of the shadows at the end of blowback to tell Jesse Trindade, his fellow Marine, what was going on in this undercover program, PATCON, which the FBI whistleblower, whose name is John Matthews, told Jesse he believed that Oklahoma City was a PATCON operation. And he told Jesse Trindade that he knew that the FBI had created this Aryan Republican Army as a front group. So, the scenario suggests that there is a very strong question about whether this bombing, would have happened without the group being created.
Yeah.
I will go that far.
Well, has there been any, whether you or anyone else, any pressure on the Trump administration, Pam Bondi? There's been so much focus on releasing the RFK Jr. file, or the RFK files, and the Martin Luther King Jr. files. What about this one?
I'm glad you asked, because certainly this is, we might call this the summer of transparency, right? I mean, this is the big push. Americans in their DNA want to know the truth about their country and their story. And that is true of the Oklahoma City bombing, as it is true of Jeffrey Epstein, as it is true of Russiagate. All the hottest stories of the moment seem to boil down to America wants to know the truth. And yes, first of all, this Freedom of Information Act lawsuit is still pending and waiting for the judge's decision. It has been waiting for a decade because of witness tampering charges that were brought by Jesse Trindade at the trial, when the whistleblower, John Matthews, suddenly dropped out, dropped out as the star witness, telling Jesse he had been pressured by the FBI and he feared that his handlers would take away his medical benefits and his pension. As he put it, I don't want to be just another homeless vet living under a bridge. So that huge action is pending, and so is the judge's decision about the surveillance, the release of the surveillance videotapes. Also, related and very important matter, Trindade has a letter on the desk of Attorney General Pam Bondi asking that the Justice Department stand down from resisting unsealing deposition given by that whistleblower, which might lay out the entire scope of this secret FBI PATCON infiltration program that sounds so much like, as you point out, the Gretchen Whitmer kidnap plot and some other very signal events, including the Boston Marathon bombing, where there are grave questions about whether that older brother who was killed may have himself been an FBI informant. So yes, the push is on, and because of the lawyer at the middle of my book, Blowback, it represents a postmortem of a cover-up of a sort that we may find out was certainly far from one of a kind.
Well, there are two, for me, if there were two cases that I would really, I hope, get opened up, get looked at. One of them is TWA Flight 800, and the other one has been this one. And so hopefully your book, with all this incredible information in it, is going to prod that along to some degree, maybe even faster than that. Our author of the week, Margaret Roberts, the book, I recommend everyone go pick it up. ABC Books North Glenstone, of course, sponsoring our author of the week. The book is Blowback, the Untold Story of the FBI and the Oklahoma City Bombing on Springfield's Talk 1041. I'm Nick Reed. Yeah, gonna throw it over to traffic. A few minutes late, ran, as I'm sure you can understand why, a little long with that author of the week. If you missed any of it, the podcast will be up or sometime after the show's over. I recommend that you do go back and listen to it. It's one of the better ones, personally, that, it's what I think anyhow. And, of course, I recommend that you do pick that book up. ABC Books North Glenstone always sponsoring our author of the week. A huge thank you to them for that. A traffic update now.
Springfield's Talk 1041, the first alert forecast from Ozarks First, meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by J&S Automotive. Today we'll see a slight chance for showers in the morning, otherwise mostly sunny and hot with a high near 95. Tonight mostly clear with a low around 73. For your Friday, sunny and hot with a high near 99. And taking a look at Saturday, sunny and hot with a high near 98.
Ozarks Elder Law, you all are familiar with Lori Rook, and we've talked the last couple of weeks about the nursing home situation and the importance of planning way ahead for that, and just in terms of what to do with your things when you pass along. But something that many people may not think about quite as much, special need family members. And if you may be the responsible one, and maybe you're relatively young, and so, you're not worried about what happens when I'm not around. But, any given day, people are in accidents in which, out of the blue, completely unexpected, lose their lives. And if you are the caretaker for somebody with special needs and you have not had the legal drawings up in order to make sure that when you pass on, you've decided whom it is that will take care of that special needs person, the government does it. The state will decide, and whether that's they'll plug them into some facility or it will not be you. And so, that can be such an unfortunately problematic situation. Ozarks Elder Law can help make sure that you have all of that planned out and taken care of so they are not left in what could be a potentially horrific situation. And I know the vast majority of you listening right now aren't in that particular situation. Maybe you know someone that is, in terms of a caretaker for somebody with special needs, or maybe you are that person and you are relatively young, and so you haven't thought about that. You need to think about it. And a consultation with Ozarks Elder Law, no cost. It's free, courtesy. And then one price they'll give you up front once that consultation's done, in order to let you know what you need to do to make sure that that person is taken care of should you pass on unexpectedly. You can find them at ozarkselderlaw.com. A couple tidbits of news over the last 24 hours or so regarding Epstein, and more specifically perhaps Ghislaine Maxwell. Number one, yesterday the media is so insistent on making it look like Donald Trump is the one that needs to be frightened of Epstein revelations. That, and if there has been anyone that has handed Trump a headache unnecessarily, if there has been one massively unforced error from this administration, it has been the way this Epstein thing, largely Pam Bondi, has been handled. And it has allowed the media and the Democrats to falsely paint a picture that Trump is really the one and Republicans are the ones who are scared of these revelations. And, of course, we've talked about the absurdity of this, the idea that the Biden administration and Comey at the FBI and all these people who were making up stories in order to try and harm Trump had this little nugget of truth but decided to cover it up for him. Clearly doesn't make sense. The media was tripping over itself yesterday, reporting that there was going to be this secret meeting. It was going to be at the vice president's home with top Trump officials to try and figure out how to handle all this Epstein stuff. So the presentation, of course, is to make it sound like the administration is so concerned about they've had to huddle together and they've got to tackle this. They've got to come up with their story. Everybody's got to get the story straight here. Well, of course, the problem with the story is it wasn't true. You had headlines, ABC, for example, Vance expected to host Epstein's strategy dinner with Bondi, Blanche, and Patel. Got to strategize what to do here. NBC News headline, live updates. J.D. Vance, Pam Bondi, other Trump officials to discuss Jeffrey Epstein case. Now, of course, none of the outlets bother to check with any of these people to see if it's true. And I think we know why, because they don't want the answer. The answer was posted on X, a post reading, new Vice President Vance's office flatly denies the reporting, quote, the CNN story is pure fiction. There is never a supposed meeting scheduled at the vice president's residence to discuss Epstein's strategy. So much like Russian collusion, much like, Trump urinating on a mattress that Obama slept on once, much like virtually every other false allegation against Donald Trump, you have media running with headlines from anonymous sources close to people with information that turn out to be completely untrue. And unfortunately, and I'm telling you, even after it was revealed that none of this was true, I saw on with Brett Baer on Fox News a story reporting on all of this still. And then at the very end, they tag it with the fact that everybody involved has said it's not true, but then tag that with, but our anonymous sources who are familiar with people who are involved with the meeting say that he'll probably still be discussed. This stuff never ends with these people. No shame, no dignity, and the constant effort to try to derail this presidency. The upside for the American people is that all of this is proof they know that they can't go after his results. If you noticed, when Biden was president, all of the criticisms were about the results, criticisms about inflation, criticisms about, Biden's cognitive ability, who's really running things, criticisms about crime, criticisms about the border being wide open, things that affect Americans. Trump, it's made up stuff. They can't really rail on the stock market, can't rail on the economy. They can't rail on all of these peace deals. They can't rail on what he's actually doing because it's a success. A couple other stories. Ghislaine Maxwell's attorney told a federal judge that Ghislaine is opposed to the Department of Justice push to make grand jury transcripts from her case public. Again, define the narrative. The Trump administration has been attempting to reveal grand jury testimony. An Obama judge has been blocking it. Ghislaine Maxwell has been fighting to also keep it secret. The administration, according to other reports, has audio recordings of interviews with Ghislaine Maxwell and is considering releasing the transcript. And ABC News is reporting that during her marathon 9-hour interview with Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche, Ghislaine Maxwell handed the left yet another bitter pill to swallow, saying that, Donald Trump, there's no information about Donald Trump. Donald Trump hasn't done anything wrong. Donald Trump wasn't like so many of these other people. But of course, why let that get in the way of the conspiracy theory that Donald Trump is the one who's worried about what will be revealed because, he allegedly sent a birthday card once to Epstein. along with Sarah Myers.
Thank you. The Pyramid Roofing Company. It's been a hot summer, and the hot weather will continue, and extreme heat can actually cause blistering on your shingles, which then weakens your roof and opens the door to costly damages down the road. And that's where the Pyramid Roofing Company team comes in. They've been protecting homes across the Ozarks for over 30 years now, and they know exactly what to look for when it comes to heat damage. The Pyramid team, they offer free roof inspections, residential and commercial services, and they work through the insurance process with you without making you sign anything. If you haven't had your roof checked this summer, now is the time to do so. Don't wait until those blisters turn into leaks later down the road. You can reach out to Josh, schedule that free roof inspection today, and you can find all of the contact information for the Pyramid Roofing Company under the Sarah's Endorsements tab at ksgf.com.
One of the Democrats that I think that potentially, of all of them, that could be held accountable to some degree in terms of corruption is Adam Schiff. Not for the what we now know are total lies that he was telling the American people about. Just wait, I can't reveal to you all the proof we have about this Russian collusion thing. And we now, of course, know that he knew that there wasn't any. Not because of that, but because of mortgage fraud. And this is similar to, apparently, according to the reports, it's similar to the Hunter Biden situation, which he lied on federal documents. It wasn't a matter of did he actually do it or not. He did it. Now, so his defense was he was too high on drugs to be held responsible for signing those forms claiming that he wasn't high on drugs. That obviously did not work. Now, what Adam Schiff's defense is going to be in court, now publicly, of course, it's Donald Trump's trying to punish me because I'm a political enemy, but you can't really do that. I guess you could do it in court. Don't know that it would fly. But regarding his potential reason for concern, analyzing the situation Schiff is in, Greg Jarrett yesterday on Fox News.
Well, he needs a good criminal defense attorney right now because I think it's very likely that he'd be charged with a whole host of crimes: bank and mortgage fraud, wire fraud, mail fraud, false statements to a financial institution, and defrauding the government. And if convicted, he's looking at 30 years behind bars. The records show that for the better part of 2 decades, he claimed his primary residence as Maryland. And remember, he's a California elected official. But naming Maryland gave him more favorable loan terms and lower interest rates than a secondary mortgage, which is what Maryland should have been. But simultaneously, as you point out, Liz, he claims his California home is primary, takes a homeowner's tax exemption on that. And look, here's what the law says. You cannot do both. You're entitled to only one principal domicile. And Schiff had to have known this because, first of all, he's a lawyer, and second of all, he's a lawmaker who create the very laws which he allegedly violated. So pleading ignorance is not going to work. And, his spokesperson incriminated him a couple of years ago, admitting that his boss claimed both as primary residences, as if there's nothing wrong with doing that. Well, I think the IRS would tell you what's wrong with that, Liz.
Like I said, similar to Hunter Biden in that there's no real debate or whether or not the event, if you will, occurred. It did. To the point, as Greg Jarrett pointed out there, at one point somebody from his campaign said, well, yeah, it's okay. Well, it's not. And I think, again, this is part of the arrogance of Democrats, and they so long have been able to violate laws that the rest of us are held accountable for. They don't think it's that big of a deal. I think that of all of the people that have been exposed as corrupt and committing illegal acts, Schiff potentially, I don't think I'm not saying I think that he necessarily will, but potentially could be one that is held accountable to some degree. One, because of the black and white nature of it. Again, he can't deny that he signed those papers making those claims because he did it. But also, he is in a seat that were he to be convicted and go to prison, Democrats don't have to worry about it going to a Republican. And as we've seen it with New Jersey in the last year, and the senator there that recently was sentenced to however much time in prison for bribery and whatever else it was that he's going to prison for, there was no concern there that a Republican would take that seat. And so those are the only times that you ever see any sort of meaningful effort to go after a corrupt Democrat is if there's no concern that it will result in Republicans picking up a seat. And because he's in California, that may work against him, given that it'll just be another Democrat. Who knows? Maybe Kamala can take that seat. Go back to the Senate. We'll see you tomorrow at Scramblers for the Friday Road Show. Glenn Beck's coming up next. I'm Nick Reed.